I'm going to head to Brunswick, Georgia to meet author and single-handed circumnavigator James Baldwin. James did 2 circumnavigations, one beginning in 1985 and I think his second beginning 2 or maybe 3 years later. So yeah, excited to go there and meet James in person and better understand his story.
Welcome aboard. This is Allberg 30 that I refit about 5 years ago for a client, and we basically made it into what I call a Voyager edition, which we've made a lot of upgrades to it, refinished everything, replaced a lot of the gear, and made some modifications, such as this outboard well. This has got a 9.8 horsepower tilt-up outboard well for drag-free, snag-free sailing. Got rid of the broken Atomic 4 inboard gas engine.
James, where was the idea of this well originally conceived?
Well, when I was sailing my boat around the world, at first I had an inboard engine, which was troublesome and always needed work, and I was more of a sailor and less of a motor sailor. So I went engineless for 8 years, cruising all over the Pacific and Southeast Asia on my boat. And then, you know, with a lot of adventures during that episodes, that you know, it can be dangerous to sail without an engine. I started thinking about, well, how can I add an outboard? Because I knew I didn't want to go back to the complexity and expense of an inboard on a small boat. Just didn't suit my cruising style. So at first I put a outboard bracket on my transom, and then I was always thinking, is there a way I can get the outboard protected and further in on the boat so that it's not, the prop isn't sucking air when the water's a little choppy, and it's a little less unsightly and less prone to theft. On that Triton next to us there, you can see is the same as my boat. It's another one that I refit. That's got a outboard well built into that box, which is the same thing I did on my boat. So eventually, after years and years of thinking about it and measuring and scratching my head, I finally decided, okay, I'm going to rebuild the aft end of the cockpit and get that motor in there. So I've done probably 10 of these conversions on all different kinds of boats over the years. And what's required is a boat that has an overhanging transom, and it has space between the transom and the tiller head fittings for the lazarette locker to be utilized. So these boards will lift out and slide out so that the motor can be tilted down, and they're in place for at sea for less turbulence. And so it's not meant to be watertight down there. The seas can come in and drain back out as needed, but the whole locker is watertight. There's 3 buoyancy chambers underneath the gas tanks on each side, and under the front are 3 buoyancy chambers to seal it off from the bilge, so there's no chance of flooding the boat. Now this is a 9.8 horse for an Allberg 30. That's plenty of power. People often think, oh, you're underpowered, but they don't rate inboards and outboard horsepowers the same. There's a lot of loss on an inboard horsepower rating, so you need less horsepower in an outboard. So these lee cloths are also supported in the center to this handrail, so that you can get in and out of it by unclipping one end.
Just one end,
not
yeah.
having all your bedding tumbling out onto the cabin sill. And then they just go out of the way under here. There's lockers under here for storage. Portable fans can be moved around. They have a clip-on bracket, which is kind of handy. Just plug them into any outlet that's handy. Yeah, there's 3 outlets on the boat for shore power or inverter. The electrics here is all contained in one area at the switch panel. Right here, that's all the electrics, the AC under there, the DC bus bars and terminal blocks. He didn't require a lot of complicated electrical and electronics in this boat.
I know those.
But he did have us install a SSB transceiver, the previous owner. So that's there. A ham radio,
Yeah.
amateur radio. Yeah, 250
Okay.
watt solar panels on trackers. I'll show you that they can be tilted to catch the sun. So normally you can just leave them fixed, but if you find that you're needing a little more output, you can turn them and tilt them a couple of times a day, relocate them so that you're getting a better angle on the sun, and I find that you can increase the output by about 30% typically by doing that just 3 or 4 times a day if you really need the power. Otherwise, you can just set them and forget them. Yeah, it's a Norvane, which was built in California. They went out of business a couple of years ago, though. So nowadays, if we need a Windvane, we'd probably choose a German Wind Pilot Pacific or maybe a Cape Horn outboard model, the Canadian stainless version. They're both good. So we put all new rigging on, and this boat originally had teak tow rails. We replaced them with these aluminum tow rails, and so the boat came to me, the tow rails were entirely missing, and so we were faced with either going back with original teak or converting them to more practical aluminum. So that's kind of unique on this boat. Now that the inboard engine is out, we were able to make the 2 side lockers in the cockpit watertight lockers. So we've got those collision bulkheads forward and aft wherever we could put them, and there's a big integral water tank fiberglassed into the underneath the cabin sole on this. There's where the engine used to be. Now it's a great big storage locker and access to the aft bilge. Might want to take a look at the Triton next door.
Let's
I
do
can
that.
open that one. That one's even a little more nicely fit out than my boat.
How'd that happen?
Well, the owner brought the boat to me 2 years ago, and he said, "I like what you did on your boat. Can you replicate it on my Triton?" And along the way, we found some ways to improve it. So we added a Harkin roller furler and a heavy-duty Garhauer anchor roller, and then here is a extendable sprit pole that can be deployed if you loosen this anchor and twist it out of the way, and that would be for code 0. You can see on this boat in the Companionway we have security bars which allow ventilation but keep intruders out. So if you're sleeping inside on a hot night and you don't want somebody to surprise you, you can have those in place. My friend, we were buddy boating together, and when he got to Madagascar and I was still in Mauritius or Reunion Island in the Indian Ocean, we got separated for a while. He used to laugh at me about my security bars. "Oh, what are you doing locking yourself in behind bars at night? What the hell's wrong with you?" Well, he was asleep one night on his boat at the anchorage, and 3 local guys swam out, climbed aboard, and he woke up with a knife at his throat. And so they stabbed him several times during the ordeal and robbed him and stripped the boat of absolutely everything. But he survived. He made his way to a hospital the next day and got fixed up, mostly recovered. But it's a lesson he learned, and then he said, "I'm off to get some security bars welded up."
Right, swiftly purchase some security bars.
This is the boat we just finished in the last year and launched it. It's ready for the owner to go cruising. Well, on this boat and on many of the boats we've done, we have strengthened areas that we thought needed it and added integral water tanks because they're the most space efficient, and they also provide collision bulkheads with themselves, because if you've got a standard, say, fiberglass or plastic water tank, say up in the V berth, well, if you get a hole in the hull somewhere behind that water tank, you haven't got a chance of stopping the water coming in. And if you build an integral tank, you not only maximize the space available for whatever capacity of water you want to carry, now it's a watertight locker, collision bulkhead incorporated. You're never going to sink your boat by having some damage up there. And then all the lockers adjacent to it in the V berth are also all watertight with gasketed latching lids on top. So they're storage lockers, but they're still safety collision bulkheads. And we did the same thing with the cockpit lockers now that we got rid of the inboard engine, and we're able to utilize this for storage. So he's just got a storage locker there, and he's already got his gear in there. He's got my Atom kerosene stove here, but more often we put in Rego alcohol stoves. They're easier to operate than a kerosene stove. So the Drogue shackles to the chain plate on each corner of the transom, and a slightly smaller one for this lighter boat over here.
All right, James. Well, hey, thanks so much for taking the time today to show us around your latest projects. I'm sure the new owners are going to be just delighted to get underway, and they're going to have a ball.
We're ready to go.